In this video, we're going to walk you through and show you how to set up and integrate Testim with Azure DevOps. We're going to assume you have an account with Testim, you've logged in, you've created some tests, and that you've used Azure DevOps. If there's additional things or questions that you have on what we're covering here today where you need more clarification, please go out and look at our YouTube channel. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So as you can see here, we're logged into Testim. We're in the test editor where we're going to create a test. But before we continue with what we're going to focus on, if you go in here and if you're following what I'm doing here, this is a code snippet that allows you to create and quickly set up a pipeline in Azure DevOps that's going to run and execute tests on the Testim platform. That is actually not what we're going to cover in this video. What we're going to cover in this video is the use case where you want to send test results into Azure DevOps. Maybe you want to update a work item, maybe you want to create a new work item, etc. We're going to cover that specifically. Keep in mind it's an example. There are probably multiple ways you can do this. I'm sure there's multiple different data or fields that you can send into Azure DevOps. This is an example that should be able to get you set up and working to get this integrated in your Testim project. So let's go ahead and begin. So the first thing we need to do is if you go to this URL right here, github.com testimio/customactions-examples. And really what we want to do is we want to go and look at this right here. We want to scroll down to where we see hook functions. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create an after step. So we click on this and we're going to go ahead and cut and paste this. But I want to scroll down here a little bit. So if you look at any of our GitHub actions, custom actions examples, you'll see that there's all these details that are commented out. So in this case, we're not going to pass in any parameters. We can see that we need to create a custom action. So we're going to cut and paste this, and this is going to be called after step. So we're going to come in here. We're going to go ahead and create a custom action. We're going to call it after step. We want it to be a shared step. This means it's going to be available amongst any other tests that we have, okay? I'm going to go ahead and create step. We're going to cut and paste that and put that in here, and then we're good, okay? So if we go back over here, the next thing we need to do is create an after test-azure-devops.js. So we need to get this, okay? And if we scroll down here a little bit, we can see that this is a CLI action, okay? And if we scroll up, and again, there's some other details in here that we're going to cover in a minute, but it tells what parameters we need to pass in, etc. This is very important. If you're going to run locally, we need to make sure that we've installed the request npm package, okay? So let's go ahead and cut and paste this. We're going to copy this, come over here, and we're going to create a CLI action, and we're going to call it after test. Again, we want it to be a shared step, and we're going to cut and paste this and put this in here. Now, if we scroll all the way to the top, we scroll down here just a little bit, here's some additional data that you're going to need to set as it relates to your Azure DevOps installation. So the token, the bearer token, you're going to need to set that. That's unique to your Azure DevOps environment and configuration. You're going to need to set your organization and your project. Some additional things down here to keep in mind. This is a tag in Azure DevOps. You can create different tags. You don't need to use this, but this is an example if you wanted to do that. Maybe you wanted to say Testim test case. You could do whatever you want there. And then down here, this is very important. So if a test fails, right, and there's an existing work item, we're going to move that to committed when we look at the Azure DevOps board. If there is a work item that's new that has failed, a new test that's failed, we're going to create a work item and it's going to be in the new category. And then a work item that is passed, we're going to move to the done portion in the boards. And we're going to cover this in a minute when we pull up the Azure DevOps board, okay? So now we've created both of these. I'm actually going to delete both of these steps because we actually don't need them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to create a configuration. And we're going to call it Azure DevOps. Okay, and if we scroll down here, we're going to do an after step, and we're going to pick our after step JavaScript shared step that we added, and then we're going to click on after test handler, and we're going to click on after test. Okay, and We're going to call this Azure DevOps. I'm going to say this is example. Okay, so what I just showed you, you're never really going to have to do again unless you want to update one of those shared steps. Let's say we want to go ahead and create a new test, and we want to come down here and we want to pick that Azure DevOps configuration. I can pick that here. Okay, so now as we can see, any other test, I can quickly add that configuration, and depending on if the test passes or fails, it's going to send that data into Azure DevOps. Okay, so let's quickly jump over to a working example. So as we can see here, we have a working example. We're going to go ahead and run this test, and this test is going to run. And again, we're running this locally, so as we can see here, if we go and look at our results in here, we can see here that we sent some data into Azure DevOps. Okay, here we go. The other important thing is, if you're running this locally, it's important not to close the browser until you see that the actual test result here, whether it's passed, whether it's failed. If you close the browser prior to that, it may fail the after test step, which is very, very important. So now, if we jump over here to Azure DevOps, we can see here that it has sent some data into Azure DevOps. So we can see here that we have a new item, ADO demo example. This was our test. If we go back here, we can see that our test name was called ADO demo example. We can see ADO demo example here, demo example. We're expecting a hello test, and we actually saw hello John. So if we click on this, we can see all of the steps in the Testim test case. Okay, if we wanted to set priority, we could do that. We could set any of these other fields if we wanted to. This would be just interacting with the Azure DevOps API. We can see Testim made, that was the tag that we passed in. And if we scroll down here a little bit further, we can see that we've made a comment, so we can actually click on view results, and this is going to take us directly back to the failed test in Testim. Okay, so let's go back to Azure DevOps, and let's go ahead and actually run this test again. Back to Testim and run this test again. So as you can see, it was pretty easy and pretty simple to set up the Azure DevOps integration. It took about maybe under 5 minutes, obviously, because this video is 7 minutes long so far. And we can see that this test now has failed. So now if we go to Azure DevOps, we can see that this has actually been moved to committed, because now it was an existing work item that was updated, but it's failed, so it's now in a committed state. And again, all of these things can be customized and changed. So at a really high level, hopefully that this provided a lot of insight as to how to set up Azure DevOps with Testim. Go out to our website, check the YouTube channel, or reach out to us if you have additional questions.